Hey Daniel, how you doing? It's Rudy here. I've just got the screen capturing software all kind of working and set up. So um, I was just going to take you through a couple of things about synthesis in Reason. Just because it's something that you have at the moment and you can use and you can follow along. So I am using the latest version of Reason, but I will only use the old school synths that they've got in the old version of Reason. So I've just opened up a new Reason file here. I'm just going to create a mixer just out of habit, because once you create a mixer, you can then add as many instruments without having to rewire them and then recreate a mixer. So it's always good to make a mixer first. And then I'm going to add an instrument. I'm going to add a subtractor analog synthesizer, which doesn't sound very analog really, but it'll do. So the next thing I'm going to do with the subtractor, I'm just going to initialize the patch, and that's going to give me sort of like a really basic synth tone. I'm just playing it there. That's what it sounds like, and all that is, it's what's called a sawtooth wave, which is kind of the most common like synth wave you find out there for techno and that sort of thing, and certainly for psytrance it's very, very common. But it's usually the sort of the building block of a lot of sort of electro synth patches and techno synth patches. So, but I'll just run through sort of the different areas of this synth and kind of what they do and what they mean. This part here is called the oscillator, and what the oscillator is it's the sound source. So the way sound works is that your speakers, they like move like in a inwards and outwards, and they make the air move, and the movement usually goes backwards and forwards, and so in a synthesizer it kind of does that electronically, and that's what the oscillator is. The oscillator is kind of like, you see this little shape here. I'm just going to run through a few of these different shapes, forget about 5 and 6, but so here we have this is like a round shape. That one's like kind of like a triangle sort of shape. That one goes straight up and then straight down, and then that one goes straight up and then it slides down, and that's actually the shape that your speakers are making. They're making it really fast, of course, but that's the shape your speakers are making when the sound comes out of the synthesizer. Alright, so that's the triangle wave, that's the square wave. So here my speakers are going forward and then immediately they're going all the way back. Whereas here the speakers are going forward and then going back slowly. So that's what the oscillators are. Now this particular synth has got 3 oscillators, I guess technically, but I would say it's usually, most people would call this third one down here, it's more like a noise generator. The oscillators get turned on by these red buttons that are up here. So what we can do is, so right now that's the sound that I have in the first oscillator. I can have the same sound in the second oscillator. It sounds very similar. So it's got a little bit of a, it's playing a little bit later than the other one, so you hear like a flange sort of effect, but effectively it's just making it louder, so that there's no real point in having that on unless we do something different with this oscillator. So I might do something like put in a triangle and put it up the octave. So that's just within music, when you have notes that are really in tune with each other, they actually share the same name. So like for instance, a note C, if you play the next note C that's higher, that effectively sounds the same, just higher. That's what I've just done there. I've shoved it up the octave. So and I can, you start hearing some changes as I make it even higher. Hear that high note there? So one thing you're going to notice is that the the sawtooth wave. Let's go back to just one oscillator. The sawtooth wave is actually I'm just gonna pull this up here. That's the filter. We'll get into that in a minute. Sawtooth wave is actually really bright. That's without the filter. Right, so it's a really bright wave. So I can play really low notes, and they've got a lot of like high frequency sound in them. The square wave is not quite as bright. But it's still pretty bright, and it's got a kind of a hollow sort of sound. The triangle wave is kind of really dull. It hasn't got much of a sharp sound to it at all. But it's got a little buzz to it. And that's because effectively what happens is whenever you see an angle in this waveform, it means it's got a high frequency in it. So that's got a little bit of an angle. That's got a lot of sharp angles, and it's got a really sharp angle. So that angle is actually sharper than this one, which is why it's brighter. Right here, this one hasn't got any angles. It's really smooth. And if I go higher, it sounds really... Right, so it's really, really smooth. Sounds like a Rhodes or something. So, so they're the oscillators. You can select what octave you want. So that's so when a different octave will sound like this. So that's going to be like one octave there, and if I go up, it's the same note, same sort of pitch. The two notes work well together, but it's just higher. Then you have this semitone. So this is allowing you to go through the octave. So you could, what you could do, for instance, if I have that one, if I set, we'll put the two oscillators on. So that's one oscillator. I'll put the next one on, but then I put the semitone up to like around 7. Then you can hear there's a second sound in there. That sounds kind of 80s. And so that's just sort of altering the pitch of the second oscillator. You then have this real fine tune over here, this sense, and that's actually really, really cool for creating sort of progressive sort of trance sounds. Like, so if I, especially when you use them with square waves, I find it sounds really good. So what you tend to do, because you want to keep your synths all sort of roughly in tune, if you go, what I'm about to do is what's called detuning, and so because you want to keep your synths in tune, I usually take it down by the same amount that I take it up, and you get a sound like that. And you might have heard that in like drum and bass, and that's a little much, so it makes it like a warbling sort of sound. That's still like a lot, maybe 9 cents. Right, and when you combine that with a filter, which effectively cuts out some of that high frequency, you can get some really cool little sounds. I'll just turn the filter down low. A little too low. Okay, so that's the that's detuning oscillators.